Hello everyone, all participants. Welcome. Welcome to this webinar. I'm Deepthi Gubba and I'm accountable for branding and communications at Gubba Cold Storage. I welcome you all to this webinar on secondary agriculture and opportunities for agri-professionals. We have people representing diverse streams like seed companies, academicians, students, professors, scientists, entrepreneurs, etc. They are from diverse streams, but all of them are united by one string, and that is agriculture. Today, Gubba Cold Storage and CAPA has come together to make this available, the knowledge about the multifold opportunities in activities related to secondary agriculture from the horse mouth, none other than Dr. Ashok Dalwai. Dr. Ashok Dalwai, as a member of Indian Administrative Service 1984, has served the states of Odisha and Karnataka and has been with the Government of India since 2010. He is presently serving as CEO of the National Rainfed Authority India in the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare in the rank of Secretary to Government of India. Dr. Dalwai is a student of Agricultural Sciences with post-graduation in Agro-Economics and PhD in Economics. Apart from holding several positions in his career at field and policy formulation levels, Dr. Dalwai has contributed immensely to effecting several reforms. As chairman of Interministerial Committee of Doubling Farmers' Income, his 14-volume report is recognized as one of the most comprehensive and evidence-based strategies. Dr. Dalwai has now been tasked to supervise DFI implementation as chairman of Empowered Body. In recognition to his services, Dr. Dalwai has won several awards, including conferment of honorary doctorate by his alma mater, the University of Agricultural Sciences, Dharwad, Karnataka. We also have a revered individual who has contributed his life for the development of millets, none other than Mr. Vilas Tonapi, Director, Indian Institute of Millets Research. He also served as His special attainments include planning, development and management of crop improvement programs, and strategies for food and nutritional security. He has been awarded R.V. Swaminathan Gold Medal for his PhD in J.N. Tata Endowment Award and GRDC Fellowship for Postdoctoral Program. He has, to his credit, 52 research papers, 30 authored and edited books, and more than 75 papers presented in various seminars and symposia. Today, Dr. Vilas Tonapi will be moderating our webinar. And for the convenience of the smooth delivery of the seminar, all the participants are virtually muted. We request you to post your questions in the Q&A section, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. Your questions will be addressed in the last 30 minutes of the session. In case due to time constraints, if your questions are not answered, we shall get them addressed from the speakers and mail you the answers. Finally, due to technical limitation, if your colleagues are not able to log in, please guide them to view this session live through our Facebook page, which is called Gubba Seed Cold Storage. I repeat, Gubba Seed Cold Storage. So currently we have 154 participants, and yes, we have 700 registrations, but we are just waiting for people to log in. And I now hand over the platform to Dr. Vilas Tonapi to take it forward. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Deepthi. It has been a wonderful evening with Dr. Ashok Dalwai. I think this will be a wonderful session of learning and also looking at how we take forward this initiative that has been put together so painstakingly. And I would like to really start from where you left in introducing Ashok Dalwai. In fact, there are two components to his personality we can look at. His work in tribal areas in Kalahandi in Orissa and in the urban areas as the Commissioner of Bangalore Municipal Corporation gives him two-dimensional a personality trait where he understands both rural and urban areas. That's where his capacities in terms of making policies and acts spur together. If we can go on listing few of those things, maybe the Model Agricultural Produce and Livestock Marketing Act of 2017, Model Contract Farming and Services Act and Guidelines for Grameen Rural Agricultural Markets. And not only these, there are many firsts to his credit. He has been one of the founding pillars of UDAI, which we call it as Aadhaar today. And the second is the initial policies of first agriculture policy of Odisha, then also the textile policy of Karnataka, and the self-assessment scheme of property tax was started in Bangalore by him. That's what, which was really taken forward throughout India later. So these things really add to his personality, but of late we have heard from the Prime Minister that we need to have initiatives to double the farmers' income. That's where his work as a special task force chairman to really make strategies and the policy perspectives to double the farmer income. There are 14 volumes of these books which have been done in a record time. I was very happy to associate with him in one of the volumes on millets and nutri-cereals basically. And if we can really go through, each one is a lucid account of how the things are today, how what we can do, and what should be the policy perspectives and strategies that need to go further. So these 14 volumes, I think, are the direction for the government of India and also for the state governments. And that's how we see in the last 5 years as a person who is really into the policy making, we have seen 3 revolutions. One is Pulse Revolution we have seen. Now the oilseed revolution is in the offing along with the millet revolution. This is for the first time in the government of India, there is a policy around dryland agriculture. We always talked about irrigated agriculture and the green revolution per se. I think we are heralding into an era of greening the dry areas and dry ecosystems of the country. That's what the contribution of Ashok Dalwai in terms of policy framing comes into picture. So several awards, medals, I think a number of things which I will not go into the details, but as a proud alumni from the College of Agriculture, Dharwad, when we were in undergraduate, he was doing his master's program. And he has been a leader for each one of us because he really guided the students, because they were the first batch that got into the Indian Administrative Service there. Then there were clubs which he really mooted to train the youngsters to shape their mind, how they can come up, because everybody coming from rural background did not have the opportunity to go to the best of the colleges. But that is where the grinding happened. That is where the development of the systems and also the mental makeup to take the administrative forest services, then the state administrative services. We see a number of people today in the services, but I think the credit goes to Ashok Dalwai. Sir, with this, I would like to stop here in introducing you, but I would like to say a few words on today's topic basically. Secondary agriculture. In fact, we were trying to look at the definition. You don't find the definition. In fact, the Wikipedia and some of the European concepts, if we see, the economic activities around primary agriculture, whether it is a grading or packaging or drying or adding value to the actual agricultural produce, that constituted the kind of economic activity and brought into a framework of what we call as the secondary agriculture in the initial days. But the new dimension was offered in the secondary agriculture today, because from the primary agriculture and his activities on the farm per se, farmer cannot double his income. Probably the activities of the agricultural land and also the additional activities that he can take up And it's not just the individual farmer per se. It is basically federating the farmer, grouping them into a FPO, providing farm gate processing services, then linking them to an entire value chain of activities so that his income gets normally doubled because he has the bargaining chip of value addition so that he can link to the farmer, what you call the processors, he can link to the marketing chains. That's how the farmer gets connected to the market. And now it's not just the primary agriculture, it can be any activity, whether it is the beekeeping, whether it is the honey production, whether it is the mushrooms, or you add any kind of activities that can add income to the farmer are a welcome step, and that is where the government policies are also coming into picture. And before I conclude, I would like to add one point, a new policy that is coming into in the form of micro food processing, wherein one product per district also is one of the encouraging tone of the government of India, which is going to help the farmers to make them or make farmer as an entrepreneur, and then so that he is getting linked to the value chain. So with this, I am sure the sustainable livelihoods are going to improve, the incomes are going to increase for the farmer, and the green revolution that we visioned in earlier, I think with the dryland agriculture and allied activities on the farm of value addition and value chain, I am sure will be the what you call the flashpoints in Indian agriculture today. So with this, I stop here, sir. The floor is yours. We are very eager to hear from you, and it's all a learning experience that we are all looking for. Thank you very much, sir. Sir, your mic is muted. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. All our friends here. So now, Deepti, you're the first time that I'm meeting you, but thank you very much for hosting me. And of course, Ramesh and Narayan, but they're all very old friends. We all studied together. And Vilas, of course, is much younger to us, but it's always very a pleasant experience to be interacting with him. And over the last 5 years, I've been interacting very closely with him. And as Deepti, you introduced him, he actually is so passionate and professional about millets. And that is the new revolution that India requires from the nutrition perspective and also from the rain-fed agriculture perspective. And thank you very much, Vilas, for all the kind words that he gave me. In fact, I feel a little shy and squeamish about accepting all those things. But then all of you make me aware of the good days that we all spent at Agriculture College, Dharwad. And it is nice to go back into the times and relive those beautiful moments. And when Ramesh and me all were studying together for the competitive exams, I do remember the exchanges that we used to have about general knowledge. He's the one who told me so much about Chaurasia. I don't know whether he remembers or not. The great musical talents of that great man. So there are little things that come to me flooding today as I see every one of you. And I can see from the chat box that there are people saying hello from different parts of the country whom I have met. So his entire agriculture family is here, right from Maharashtra to other states, to Karnataka, Andhra. And of course, Hyderabad is a hub of agriculture professionals. And so it's nice to be connecting with Hyderabad. And in fact, that's where I started my career. So I have a lot of touch with Hyderabad. That's where I was trained in the police academy when I began my career in 81, 82. So thank you very much. So now let me thank all the agriculture professionals of Hyderabad and other states who have given me this opportunity and being co-hosted by Guba Cold Store. It is very nice that you have picked up this topic of secondary agriculture. In fact, the way forward is to actually take secondary agriculture forward. Now, when I saw the topic, secondary agriculture and opportunities for agriculture professionals, then I was wondering, how do I define agriculture professionals? Then, as students of science, always we keep building up logic. So I thought, let me see what the meaning of professional. and then see how to define an agriculture professional and how do we link up that to the second agriculture. Certainly, I'm not an academic who can start defining all these things, but only as somebody who has spent a long time in administration or management, I can only say so much that a professional is somebody who has built an appropriate basket of knowledge, skill, and training. He's somebody who has committed value system. That means he's a dependable person. He has certain ethical values. He always keeps in mind the vision and the goals of his organization. And he brings what is called efficiency to the task on hand, keeping in mind the long-term goals. And when we talk about efficiency, it can be quantitative as well as qualitative. Hence, a professional is somebody who is always committed to efficiency in terms of quantitative and qualitative parameters. So if this person embodies all these traits is a professional, it makes it very easy for us to now prefix any terminology and then call him ex-professional. So he could be an industrial professional, he could be an agricultural professional, he could be an academic professional. So in that sense, an agricultural professional is not different from any other professional. And particularly an agriculture professional, like a medical professional or an engineering professional, is somebody who goes through rigorous training. He undergoes a system of knowledge which is both abstract as well as deep and horizontal. Hence, anybody who has gone through an agricultural graduation or a post-graduation is an agricultural professional. However, he has to then combine the other traits that we talked about. So today, with this preamble, my task would be to combine or integrate secondary agriculture with the agricultural professional and then indicate what kind of opportunities actually lay ahead. Now, having a broad sweep of agriculture professional, let's all agree that it can include a researcher, it can include an academic, it can include a corporate manager, it can be an entrepreneur, and it can be a farmer. So everybody who is associated with agriculture in some way, including the farmer who in fact undergoes a lifetime of learning and experience, is a professional. But we need today in our changed world to understand the new dynamics of agriculture, both in India and the world over, and see how we can actually enable to address the emerging challenges in agriculture. So when we talk about emerging challenges in agriculture, we must all appreciate that it actually starts with ecology as reflected in the climate change. The farmer and the farming system may not be a great contributor to this negative influence of climate change. Yet he is the one who actually directly bears the brunt of climate change. And if the farmer and the farming bear the brunt of climate change, the entire consumer world also comes to bear this climate change negative impact. So that we must understand. And secondly, from the farmer's perspective itself, what we see today is that the rate of marginal returns on the investments are decreasing. In the sense that if you want to realize one extra quintal of grain or fruit or milk, whatever is the measure, then the quantum of hardware that needs to go into that is increasing, which only means that we need to increase the cost of production to realize higher volumes of output. And that is not a sign of sustainable production system. And the second one is, if we keep on adding hardware increasingly as we have been doing in our country, it automatically has a negative impact on the climate of production, soil systems, the post-harvest management systems, the pasture lands for the cattle, or the water quality for the fish. That means every segment of agriculture gets to be impacted because of the intensive system of agriculture going. In short, what happens is, when we have increasing agricultural challenges, and increasing challenges to realizing higher productivity, the outcome is that profits get impacted. So profits get impacted because we are not able to increase our productivity. And second, more importantly, that we are not able to monetize that produce into appropriate value. When we talk about monetization, what we mean is that we have moved away from producing food for our families or for the entire country, that is a food security, to actually producing surpluses. And as we increase the surpluses become meaningful only when we can find markets for them. And if we cannot find markets for them, all that extra thing gets wasted. It gets wasted for the farmer, it gets wasted for the country, it gets wasted for the entire global system. Just to illustrate, the quantum of food that is being wasted in the world today stands at 1.2 billion tons. That is equivalent to the total quantum of agriculture produced in our country. More importantly, that 1.2 billion tons of agriculture produce which is going waste is getting converted by decomposition into greenhouse gases. And if the quantum of greenhouse gases produced from the agricultural loss and waste is counted as a nation, it stands third in the inter-nation ranking. First one being China, second one is USA, and then comes this country called food loss and waste. Only after that do Russia and India come in that order. So that is the quantum of waste. From the farmer's income perspective, what could have been converted into money and put into the pockets actually is going waste. So this is a preamble that all of us must understand. And because the topic of second agriculture is very closely linked to this. Second one is that we now need to relook at the mandate of agriculture. We are all aware that the human civilization or the modern civilization began with a settled agriculture 12,000 years ago. We were able to produce, there was a sense of security, and therefore the people started living as community. And India was one of the grounds of this agricultural revolution. So before the green revolution, we had agricultural revolution. Please remember that is 12,000 years ago. And that's how we got the first ancient civilization, the Indus Valley civilization. But what we must remember is that old system of 12,000 years of history, where the agriculture was supposed to produce food for the people, is no more valid. It is valid to the extent that we need to ensure food and nutritional security for the growing population. But from the farmer perspective, and also from the perspective of the nation's economy, we need to generate jobs. Jobs will create money or purchasing power. So the two important objectives of agriculture today should be to generate gainful employment for everybody who's engaged in agriculture. Second one is that we should be able to generate enough incomes for the families such that they're able to live a dignified life and they're able to maintain the standards of minimum welfare. So if these are the two new objectives, we are aware that today's agriculture is not meeting these challenges. With 120 million farmers, over 140 million hectares of land, of course associated with livestock and fisheries, what we are now seeing is that large number of people are living below poverty line. Their incomes on an average are low. They do not compare well with the lowest employee of any government, be it government of India or the state governments. And more importantly, what that gets reflected is that on an average, a farm family in our country is engaged for 185 days in a year. That means 180 days is a slack period. And along with this basic human resource, which is one of the important resources that India has got, or the farmer family has got, the second most important asset of a farm family is land. And land, which can be utilized again and again and again if we have proper technology and resource access, is not being fully utilized in India. That is manifest in what is called a cropping intensity. We have a cropping intensity of 151% today, which means 141 million hectares net cultivated area has become 194 million hectares. But with proper technology, proper resource access, 141 million can become 282 million hectares minimum. Or going forward with new revolution of technology, it can become 141 to the power of 3. Okay, so that is the scope that land in India has got thanks to the climatic diversity. It is not possible in America, for example. It is not possible in Russia or in China because their climatic extremities are such that they cannot normally grow beyond one season. Whereas nature has blessed India, and we have a climatic diversity which is representative of the world. We have nearly 60%, 60 types of soils, which is one of the highest cafeteria of soils anywhere in the world. And this is good enough for India to actually increase the cropping intensity, provided we're able to use our resources efficiently and simultaneously have a proper technology, that means shorter duration crops, etc., etc. Now, let us say that we do achieve all these things, and we are therefore able to increase our volume of production, and therefore enable the farmers to market it better, market it, convert into money, increasing the order in the market. But is that enough is the question. What is more important, what is a challenge to farmers today, is that post-production has become a new challenge. When we say post-production, it starts from the time of harvesting, including harvesting. Harvesting is a watershed in the entire agriculture value system. From the pre-sowing operations to the sowing to the production, up to the time of harvest is one segment or two segments. Once the grain or fruit or other agricultural commodity is ripe for being harvested, that's where the post-harvest management begins, including how do you harvest it. And the monetization, therefore, will include not just marketing, but it includes what is called agri-logistics, that means storage and transportation. It will include the processing and then finally the marketing, because marketing is an arbitrator. Marketing decides what price is accruing to the farmer on the agriculture produce that he brings to the market. So we need to focus on marketing. Now, to take this thought of marketing forward, we shall come to agriculture, processing, and infrastructure subsequently. But let me talk about marketing because that is extremely relevant to the idea of second agriculture. When we talk about marketing, as students of agriculture marketing, what we learned was marketing efficiency. How do we ensure that marketing is efficient? And the basic definition, it says integration of market over space and time. And these are two things are so critical to ensure the farmers get good prices. When we talk about market integration or space, it only means that if the farmer in the outskirts of Hyderabad is producing some jawar, he look forward to marketing it maybe in his mandal, or at best he can reach up to Hyderabad. But then if he is similarly like him, there are many farmers who are all rushing to Hyderabad. The demand in Hyderabad may not be able to match up with the supply. So if there is excess supply over the demand in Hyderabad city, then we would expect the farmers around Hyderabad to travel further to Warangal. Then we will expect them to go to Krishna district, go to Vijayawada, Visakhapatnam, Bhubaneswar, then to Kolkata. But how does he reach from his village near Hyderabad right up to Kolkata or even beyond, and if required even to Rangoon of the Myanmar country? So this is called integration of space. That means the farmer around Hyderabad is now able to reach the market in Rangoon, in Myanmar country. So this, when he is able to do this, he is actually extending the market space from near range to long range. So if we want the farmers to meet the demand in different markets, we need to enable him to reach that far range market, because there may not be jawar being grown in Kolkata, so therefore there may be a market for that. There may not be jawar being grown in Myanmar, or people may be wanting to eat that. And if they do not know how to eat, you can teach them how to eat. That is also part of marketing strategy. But then that is called market integration of space. That means as long as we are producing more and more, our basic strategy should be to reach far and far places, not only within the state, but within the country, but outside the country. So that is called conquesting the space. So one of the important methods of finding good market, good prices is to conquer the space. The second one is to conquer the time. Let us say that we have taught the farmer, we have provided him good transport mechanism. He is able to reach within a period of time, Myanmar, Kolkata, etc. But then please realize, every agriculture produces a living organism. Not just because we harvest it, it does not die. It continues to live like any other living organism. Only thing is, the lifespan varies depending upon the nature of commodity, and that's called the perishable factor. For example, milk, highly perishable. It stays okay for 4 hours, unless you are taken some kind of a chilling. Likewise, a fruit, for example, may stay put without quality compromise for 12 hours, 24 hours, or maybe 2 days or 3 days. A potato may stay longer. A pulse may still longer. Oilseed may also require a longer time to perish. A food grain like a cereal can live still longer. That means the degree of perishability varies from crop to crop or commodity to commodity. So even if we're able to reach Burma or even America, let's say, the commodity will die sooner than later. So if we want to conquer that time so that we increase the shelf life, then we need to process it. So the way to conquer time, that means what I grow in this season, I want people to eat next season, because the people off season, they'll eat better market. So that has to go through processing, and that is what is called physico-chemical transformation of the agriculture commodity. So this is how, by conquering space and time, we'll be able to help our farmers to actually gain markets and thereby realize better prices, because always market forces operate on the principles of demand and supply. So this is something basic that we must understand. So now coming to the, how does it get related to secondary agriculture? Now Vilas was rightly saying that the term secondary agriculture is not new, but unfortunately it has not been defined in relation to what India requires, or in relation to what Indian farmers require. Our Indian farmers require in relation to finding jobs. Today there is underemployment, disguised unemployment. I told you they're engaged maximum for 185 days gainfully. The rest of the 108 days, they have no gainful employment. They have to look for Narega employment, for example. Hence, if we want to generate employment, in what ways secondary agriculture can help us? So from that perspective, our Committee on Doubling Farmers' Income did analyze, did study the literature, and you kindly look at volume 9, which deals with farm-linked activities and secondary agriculture, which has defined secondary agriculture in this context. It is talking about utilizing the lag period with respect to the human power, lag period with respect to the land, and utilizing the resources generated on the farm and in the neighborhood, including forests, and converting that into value, capturing greater value for the farm families, and in that process create jobs, so that we are generating additional jobs out of season, and we are also creating additional incomes in association with the farm incomes. So that is the basic meaning or the purpose of a secondary agriculture. So if we are talking of a new definition of secondary agriculture, what we should be remembering is that when we now put this in juxtaposition to those two things I was talking about, conquering time and space, that's where the first stage of secondary agriculture actually comes in. That today, if we want the farmers to reach the far range market, we want the farmers to go online trade, then the first thing that any purchaser, whether it is a consumer, household consumer, or an exporter, or a wholesaler, or a processing plant, everybody is looking for certain basic standards in terms of quality, specifications, etc. Now the farmers cannot take the raw produce after harvesting directly to the market. If they do that, they're not going to actually fetch a good demand. So the secondary agriculture will actually start with what is called a primary processing. Secondary agriculture begins with a primary processing. And primary processing is first to decide what is the right time to harvest. For example, mango. There's a particular time at which the mango fruit should be harvested. It depends upon the bearing load or the load capacity of the particular plant. And this is so for every single crop. There's a particular time to harvest. So the secondary agriculture begins from there. Once you have brought down the produce, we need to first, for example, clean it of the soil clods that are around it. We need to water it, use simple water, clean it up. We need to sort them out. When you say sort out, there could be some damaged product and undamaged product. And then we grade them according to some size specifications. And then we send them into the packing, what is called a pack house. Pack house is very important. We don't realize the value. I think Deepti, you can understand this. We can't directly take the produce into the cold store because there's a huge temperature difference between the cold store ambience and what is there on the field. So instead of directly taking to a cold store where the temperature is extremely low, it has to first be acclimatized by taking it to a pack house. So a pack house is a necessary adjunct to a cold store. So this is all primary processing. So when we do this primary processing, we are now generating additional value. That means the farmer is now being enabled to capture greater value, and simultaneously we are generating additional job for the farmer. And because he is able, now how does he get employment, incomes for that? Because he is putting in extra efforts, his extra wages, and he's adding value. He's going to get better prices. That means he's gaining additional income. So that primary processing is extremely important. So now it is after primary processing that we can actually go in for other forms. Okay. So now let me take you to the next stage of secondary agriculture. When we are talking about the secondary agriculture, I told you about utilizing the basic resources. Now, so let us define what is a resource. Now, unfortunately, we have defined resources so narrowly that we have only looked at what is called a grain or a fruit or a vegetable or a tuber or a root of a particular crop. We have looked at milk, for example. We have looked at meat portion of it, or of a poultry, for example, or of a red meat or a fish, only with respect to food and nutrition maximum. And we call this as the primary product. No, we now have primary agriculture and we got primary product. So primary agriculture is producing primary product. But we don't realize primary agriculture, which is all a biological system of production. Nature has built a system of actually photosynthesizing, not only into grains, it also produces other kinds of products, which are all what are called, we call them byproducts, but more appropriately, they need to be called co-products. Because what is important? Is grain important? Grain is important to man, but the stock is important as fodder to the animal, and something else might be important to something else. Hence, it would be appropriate that we now change the definition or the perception of looking at a crop or an animal and say an animal or a fish or a crop or a horticulture plantation crop produces co-products. When we say it's a co-product, then every single nature of commodity that the agriculture sector or the forest sector produces has got equal opportunity. Today, very unfortunately, we call all our byproducts as waste. It is a criminal perception of mankind. It is a criminal way of looking at the beautiful creation of nature. So when we look at all these things as co-products, then we know how to utilize every single component. The purpose of telling you is that while we produce 291 million tons of food grains, while we produce nearly 1.2 billion tons of different agriculture produce, including milk, etc., we are producing 798 million tons of crop residues. 798 million tons. And what are we doing with 798 million tons? A part of it may be utilized as fodder. A part of it may be utilized as a mulch in certain places. But a large amount of that is actually being burned down. For example, in Punjab, a small state, on an average, they burn 2.8 million tons of paddy straw only. Haryana also burns more or less similar quantum. UP burns much more than that. So a valuable commodity, agriculture commodity, is being burned down, spoiling the soil, spoiling the air, and losing value that farmers could have captured. So now secondary agriculture is looking at utilizing every single commodity, every single produce, whatever we call it, that is generated on the farm, and see how that can be utilized to create additional jobs, additional incomes, additional value. So that is all the domain of secondary agriculture. So now secondary agriculture can be further refined into three types of categories. So I hope all of us now appreciate that the entire economic spectrum of the world today in the modern economic sense is divided into three basic activities: primary economic activity, secondary economic activity, and tertiary. That means we move from agriculture as a primary economic activity to the manufacturing sector, that is secondary, and then we move to the service sector, that is the tertiary. And today in 21st century, we have got two more segments added to that, which are based on knowledge and emerging technology. So we'll not get into that. Now, primary economic activity itself, which is concerned with agriculture, now we further fine-tuned it to primary agriculture and secondary agriculture. So primary agriculture is biological dependent. It is biological system. Whether it is in the animal world, water world, or the crop world, it's a biological system of production. So that is what is called as primary agriculture. So where primary agriculture ends, secondary agriculture begins. Secondary agriculture now looks at adding value, generating additional value to the biologically generated produce. And that's where, as Vilas was rightly pointing out, that Indian context, we need to redefine that secondary agriculture from the perspective of the farmers, and more particularly from the perspective of generating jobs. That is the most required item in the country today. So how do we now generate that? So I would like to, our DFI committee rather has advocated three types of secondary agriculture activities: type A, type B, and type C, we call them as. So type A is adding value to what is generated on the farm. Type B is alternate employment opportunities or alternate agriculture activities. Third one is utilizing the co-products or what are called waste today to create wealth. So the purpose of sharing all this thing with you in matter of detail is so that you as professionals, as entrepreneurs, as researchers, as academics would be able to then link your ideas of building enterprises on this particular raw produce. That's how I want to say how agriculture is providing opportunity for us to build citadels of employment opportunities. So when you talk of the first type A, basically what it means, let us take the simplest thing, that yes, we produce a mango, for example. They can be converted into a pickle. We produce tomato, you can convert that into a tomato pickle or a ketchup, for example, through simple processing technologies. So there are innumerable ways of undertaking the primary processing that I talked to you, and simultaneously also doing the basic physico-chemical transformation and teaching our women folk there or the farmer families how do we maintain hygienic conditions, how do we maintain some basic standards, how do we maintain certain basic quality standards that are replicated from every system of production, and then they're able to capture the local market. So the primary purpose of a type A activity would be to add value to the agriculture produce generated there, and then try and capture the local market. So that is type A. So with this, naturally, we are able to produce additional employment. Type B is now alternate employment. And there are enough opportunities for this. Let us say beekeeping, which is the most popular one. Let me share with you the scope that exists for this simple activity called beekeeping. 1976, the National Commission on Agriculture, in a report, they said for cross-pollinated crops in our country, in order to improve the cropping productivity, which is very essential, we need to promote at least 155 million beehive colonies. And can you believe today we have how many? After so many decades, we have 4.6 million beehive colonies. So simple back of the envelope calculation tells us that if we want to increase the number of beehive colonies as per the recommendation of the National Commission on Agriculture, the investment is not going to be very much, but we'll be able to generate 1.2 crore number of jobs. And when we talk about beehive colony, the first thing coming to mind is honey. But if we limit our imagination to honey, we are not helping the farmers to capture all the value. So we'll take example and appreciate that not only are we trying to create additional value, but we need to deploy technology and then build vertically the integration. That means we not just produce honey, we start looking at wax, we start looking at propolis, we start looking at more refined kind of commodities that are possible from the honey, which will then go into pharmaceutical industry, cosmetic industry, and innumerable kind of industries. That means we are looking not just the horizontal expansion, but vertical integration. I'll give you a particular example why this is important after I talked about type C. So in type B, we have so many activities, whether it's mushroom cultivation, let's say the paddy straw that is being burnt, can that be utilized to generate huge quantum of mushroom? And in our country, a market survey showed that 88% of the people are not consuming the recommended protein levels. Just imagine, 88%. Some poor people can't afford, some rich people are more fat, they have such a fad for the so-called fat foods that they do not want to consume proteins. But the sum total is 88% of the people in our country are not consuming enough proteins. Okay, so we need to look at large number of activities, whether it is lac cultivation relating to forest. India is the largest producer of lac, but we are not able to utilize that lac the way we should be utilizing. Whether it is mushroom cultivation, whether it is agricultural tourism, or going into the aquaculture and produce mollusks and ornamental fish, or using all other kinds of agriculture produce that we have. There's so many things that can be done in this type B. And type C, utilizing what is called the waste today. We are talking about 788 million tons of agricultural produce or crop residues. Why can't we use all that? Because all this produce is basically having lignocellulose component. Of all these woods, for example, or the straw, whether it is the maize cob, or the paddy straw, or the cotton stalk, or anything that is biologically generated, it is a high component of lignocellulose. And lignocellulose has cellulose, hemicellulose, and different kinds of further compounds. Each of them can be utilized to produce different kinds of commodities. From the starch that our carbohydrates produce, we can have so many kinds of sugars, for example. So type A, type B, type C, which all use the land that is getting vacant, which use the residues that are being generated in the field, or the commodities or the produce that comes in the forest and then by way of minor forest produce. All of these things can actually help our farmers and the landless agricultural labor to generate additional jobs. And how do you organize these things? Ultimately, organizing is important. So we need entrepreneurs to do this thing. At all these three types, type A, type B, type C, they are amenable to three types of industries. First is Mahatma Gandhi's basic principle of cottage level and village level industries. Because that's where we need low capital, low technology. We just need to skill our people, give them the basic capital investment, help them to build a market brand, teach them the basic skills of, production policy of hygiene, etc. So they can have a cottage level industry or a farm level industry where the farm families are engaged, 3 to 4 people are engaged. Then we move on to the village level where about 10 people get engaged. The technology is a little more superior. The capital is a little more superior. Now the farm families either are members of that or they work as employees. That means now from being pure entrepreneurs, they also become employees in a cottage level industry. Further going up, when we're able to aggregate the produce from different farms, from different villages, a small, medium scale enterprise comes up under the MSME sector. Okay, so we have a cottage level industry, a village level industry, and an MSME sector industry. All of them can utilize different kinds of agriculture produce. But here, a new opportunity which the entrepreneur should be looking at is aggregation. in our country, the biggest challenge is aggregation, because 86% of farms are small farms, marginal farms. The produce is highly disaggregated. The agriculture residue is disaggregated. So if we want that to be utilized in a unified way in a particular MSME sector or in a village level industry, somebody has to take the business opportunity of aggregating that and linking it to those things. That is another opportunity. So we can have innumerable ways of generating jobs for this. So I told you that we can have 3 different types of secondary agricultural activities, and simultaneously you can have 3 types of industries, and all these 3 will require a proper policy. And for all these things, agriculture generates huge quantum. I told you 1.2 billion tons of agriculture produce, 798 million tons of crop residues, and then there are residues of animals and fish. That's another thing. Now, when talking about why do we graduate from farm level to village level to MSME and further up, we can also go to high-end technology, capital-intensive industries, which is all possible. Now, why is it required? Because more the value we're able to capture through processing as well as long-range markets, we're able to create greater wealth for the nations, increase the agricultural GVA through both processing as well as primary production. So let me give one example. Let us take the example of the animal hides. As we know, India is is home to one of the highest number of livestock. 598 million animals. Cattle, buffalo, sheep, goat, camel, yak. God, India is so beautiful. It's got anything, everything in the world. In the world is here in India. Such large number of cattle population. And so much of hide is being produced in our country, yet we account for only 2% of the global trade in hide. Now compare this with Italy, a small nation, which is host only to 2% of the animals in the world, has captured 51% of the world hide trade. To repeat, India, with the highest livestock population, has captured only 2% of the global trade in hides. Italy, with only 2% of the world livestock population, has captured 51% of the hide. How is that? It's not that we simply take our raw hide and sell. Not everybody is going to purchase. Even if they purchase, they'll give us very low price. What does Italy do? It keeps building values upon values upon values and then sells it to the world. If you take, for example, Denmark, it has got only 5% of the industrial enzyme industries, but its share in the global industrial enzyme is 47%, and it is the other way around for India. How does Europe manage, without even the basic raw materials, to capture so much of market? I think that's where the importance of secondary agriculture comes. And we have never looked at this, and we always thought of agriculture as a poor man's occupation, an illiterate's occupation. Even a boy or a girl joining agriculture college is not as much respected as somebody joining a medical college. This is a matter of perception. That means we have not understood how to capture the true value of what lies in agriculture. So this now takes us that we now want to capture market. If we want to do that, then the entire technology or market has to work reverse. Our researchers, our academic institutions, state agriculture universities, ICR system cannot be looking only at what is the productivity of jawar, productivity of paddy, productivity of milk. They may possibly have to look at productivity of other co-products, which are more important possibly than just the food grain, after of course having met the food security of our country or the nutrition security of our country. So we now need what is called an agricultural value system. We are looking at agriculture from beginning to end, and then we are now trying to produce what the markets require. And it was way back in 1957, two professors from Harvard University for the first time defined what is agriculture business. Now we are saying we want agriculture to become agriculture business. So they said, in simple way, agriculture business refers to a sum of all activities that encompass from production to final consumption. That means on input side and output side, all activities at different stages of the agriculture value chain are a part of the agriculture business. So we need to look at how to prepare our land, how to produce the seed, what kind of fertilizer or organic manure to give, what is the way of pest management, how to harvest it, how to store it, how to transport it, how to process, how to market. All these things is part of the agriculture business. So if America defined agriculture business in 1957, in 2020, I guess we should be very eager to take this in a more robust manner. So that is about agriculture business. Now, as regards the agriculture enterprise.
So Deepthi here, I'm just interrupting you, just to remind you that we have 5 minutes to go. So I want you to prepare to conclude such that we can facilitate Q&A session.
Okay, let me see. I think I'll take another 5 extra minutes with you because there's really so much to share about this stuff. Okay.
I know, I can see you are like, the way you're sharing, you have so much of content.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, so let me then quickly come to other part. I now talk to you mostly about food processing, whether it is a small scale or a large scale. I talked about the food processing. But secondary agriculture also includes what is called non-food processing. Why is that? Now, that is another answer to the surpluses that we're generating. And then there are dips in the market. A similar situation was experienced by Europe and America way back. So in 1984, the secretary or the minister for agriculture in America, he had a special meeting with all the experts of America and told them that our surpluses are increasing, the exports are decreasing because every other country in Africa and Asia is now producing its own food. What do we do? The farmers are not getting good prices. So the simple advice was re-mandate agriculture, go beyond food sector, look at those agriculture commodities which will meet our bio world, and that's called bioeconomy. So bioeconomy is what refers to the non-food sector primarily. It focuses on producing biomaterials, biofuels, and biochemicals. Today, as we know, all our materials like iron, for example, aluminum, for example, all our fuels, for example, petroleum products, all our enzymes, all are coming from the fossil resources. Fossil resources are nearly exhausting. More than that, since the Industrial Revolution, the way we have adopted technology, deployed technology, and used the fossil resources, we have been generating so much of greenhouse gas that it has added to global warming. So what has come today, if the farmers are going to suffer because there is too much of production they're making, and on the other hand, if there's a global warming, can we move away from using those non-renewable form of resources to renewable form of resources? And that's where the importance of bioeconomy comes. So in the bioeconomy, we will now start producing those kind of agriculture commodities, which will start allowing us to produce biomaterials. Luckily for us, the processing technology is undergoing a cataclysmic change. Now, if the genetic engineering or even the conventional plant breeding or other kinds of agronomic practices can help us to produce more of what we want for this industry or the bioeconomy, then we would be matching the two things that are required: better markets, better demand, and also simultaneously the global demand for biomaterials. So I was talking to you, let's say, I'll give one example of where we are not doing what we can be doing and we should be doing. Let us take the example of agar. We are all aware as students of agriculture science, we all dealt with agar in our microbiology labs and pathology labs. And of course, in industry, it is used in so many places. Can you believe to produce agar, we need a seaweed, and we are importing seaweed from Spain. Spain hardly has any coastline, very little coastline. And here is India with 8,111 kilometers of coastline. And we are not producing the seaweed required just to manufacture our agar. Whereas Spain, not only does it export us the seaweed, it also exports agar many a time. And from agar, it is going up to the next integration, that's called agarose, then further to saffrose. That means they're going up the value chain. So how do we now deploy our modern technology, the processing technology, to the appropriate biocomponent, bioproduct, to generate greater value. So we understand whether it's millets or any other hundreds and hundreds of these kind of bioproducts are possible. We can have composites instead of, for example, the stones that we're pouring and utilizing. Entire America uses wood for its house. They have developed that technology. We are mining and quarrying our mines, we are creating dust. We are more than that, spoiling the nature, compromising the nature. Greening is being compromised, and then we are building hundreds and hundreds of infrastructures. We are losing 45,000 hectares of land, fertile land every year only in brick making in the Indo-Gangetic belt and other parts. So what we should be doing is that if we want to move to secondary agriculture, we need to move. And I want to tell you that the new basket of reforms that government has introduced is going to make all this possible. If somebody wants to set up an enterprise, he needs the freedom to buy anything he wants to buy anywhere. So the new Direct Trade Act, which is a supplement to the APMC Act, now enables anybody to buy anywhere from anywhere. So a processor, an exporter, a wholesaler, or an entrepreneur, he can go and buy, and there is no restriction on that. Second, there is no restriction in storage, because as a processing plant, you may need to store a huge quantum. We had Essential Commodities Act, which actually restricted and put a threshold. Today it has been deregulated. Then we have now allotted rupees 1 lakh crore under the Agriculture Infrastructure Fund to build this agri-logistics. And then there is 20,000 crore that is being offered by the Animal Husbandry Department to build agri-logistics. 15,000 crore by the Fishery Department to build modern ports and buy new kinds of boats, help the fishermen. So that means what the new package looks at is not only just the free market environment, not only just the deregulation of agricultural commodities, but simultaneously it is looking at agri-logistics that is required. And then the next level, it has now liberalized the FDI. 100% FDI can be now brought into the country, an automatic route into the food processing sector. And then the farmer producer companies are being promoted, and they have been given a tax exemption for 5 years under the Income Tax Act. And then a Contract Farming Act is now being promoted so that the sponsoring company and the farmers can get into agreement on all along the agriculture value chain. So there's a basket of reforms, and all this supplemented by trying to increase our global trade. That means we are now aiming at doubling the exports from $36 billion US dollars in 2018 to $66 billion US dollars by 2022. So all these things are going to help improve what is called as secondary agriculture. So secondary agriculture is a way forward, and that's where the jobs will be created. That's where the people will find incomes. And please remember, the potential is so much, because today also food processing, for example, only 10% of our agriculture commodity is being processed. In fact, horticulture is still less. Whatever processing happens, it happens in the food grain sector. Horticulture, not more than 2% is being processed. But even with this less than 10% of food processing in our country, there are nearly 7 million jobs created in this country. 1.8 million in the incorporated sector, and 5.8 billion in the unregistered sector. So together there are 7 million jobs with just less than 10% of food processing. Thailand is already processing 30%. America and of course Europe are much ahead of us. So if we can simply raise our processing, food processing and non-food processing to at least 30%, we would have created 3 times the jobs that we are generating today. So look at the employment opportunities that India can offer based on the agriculture to its rural youth, to its entrepreneurs. So the entire field is ready. So my request to all of you who are listening here, the professors, scientists, the young students, entrepreneurs, and everybody else who's advocating, that let us re-look at agriculture through a new prism. It is not just a default employment. It should become a chosen employment. And it become an employment opportunity that is going to create greater employment opportunities, which can add to that, not just agriculture GVA, but to the entire GVA of our economy. And if that is going to be a new approach, then we can reorder, redesign our entire agriculture production system with the perspective of capturing markets, not just domestic, but global markets, and then find jobs for India, wealth for India. So that's how I would like you to look at the entire agriculture production system. So we can now take further clarifications, observations, and Q&A. At that time, maybe new points will come up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I can't thank you enough for the tons of information you have been giving us. In fact, we are also receiving so many compliments in our chat box. It's amazing. We got to know things that we never knew and we should be knowing. So it's an awesome session, sir. Thank you so much for this knowledge.
Thank you.
I would now like to invite Mr. Kalgati to initiate Q&A session. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Ashok, for a wonderful discourse. And hearing you, I think after 1981, such a passion, and the passion has grown. And thank you so much. Of course, we did in between, but such a long interaction was after 81.
Yeah.
Anyway, so a couple of thoughts come to my mind from the report of the doubling of farmers' income. Secondary agriculture basically dwells upon using local resources, local skills, and local enterprises. And they have dealt extensively about the marketing issue, because the backward linkage is already in place. Forward linkage is the marketing is the issue. You did deal elaborately about the aggregation and marketing and all that. So that's very important. What I've been observing over the last 3 or 4 decades is a change in the profile of farming in India. When we were students and in the agriculture college, the combine harvesting was only in Punjab, by and large. But we see a combine even in the remote tribal areas of Adilabad and Visakhapatnam in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. So these type of farm mechanization brings a new dimension of skill requirement. Gone are the days when the skill in agriculture allied was only maybe a carpenter or maybe a blacksmith or a cobbler or whatever. So there's a tremendous opportunity for development of infrastructure and skill enhancement of these supplementary activities. That's number one. Number two, when you listed about so many opportunities, etc., one thing came to my mind. About a decade back, I had happened to go to Rajendra Nagar campus here in Hyderabad, and I saw development of a pelletization unit on crop residue. A professor of, I think, veterinary science, if I remember his name, Professor Venkat Reddy, who subsequently went to Tirupati. He had developed a machinery for pelletizing crop residue, the tur, cotton stubble, the tur stubble, and maybe java stubble, etc. So such things, if the professionals can take up, the entrepreneurs studying, participating today, take it up, then maybe they go in a long way. And another thing is, has any thought been given to prepare a matrix of opportunities, making out, drawing a list of opportunities that you have listed in the report of the doubling of farmers' income, and preparing a policy matrix sort of a thing, so that we can have an action plan prepared from the report. And if that can be done, and then the vision of the committee, a vision of the government of India of doubling of farmers' income can be taken in a logical angle. So thank you very much again for such a wonderful discourse. And I open the Q&A session now for others to ask the questions. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Very nice seeing you, and we have been we are reconnecting. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Dipti, shall I summarize a few of the questions to Ashok, so that we will try to cover? There are 55 questions basically. I think we will not be covering all, but if we see these 55 questions, they get categorized into 3. One is, so you said integrating markets over space and time, and the first question that being asked in terms of economic terms is, The cost of,
So Nafi sir, I want to interrupt here.
yeah,
I also want to request the participants to raise their hands. Whoever has
okay,
questions, you can raise their hands and we will take questions. Those questions also and in the chat box as well.
okay, okay, okay,
We
okay,
will do that both, sir.
right.
Great. So
Yeah,
now go ahead. Both ways you can go ahead. Now it's your
okay.
platform.
So shall I go ahead with the chat box questions? Okay. So the question is cost of marginal return in agriculture, is it high or low? And people feel there is a abundant opportunity to increase the marginal return on investment. Number two is, as it is for professionals, whether it is a farmer or the graduates, are we prepared well at this point of time to see that the professions in agriculture, around agriculture are created? Is there a policy in place? So these two are the initial first 10 questions in wherein you can really look at the things.
Thank you, Vilas. Thank you very much. Yes, see, the first one is, of course, a straight answer. I told you that the marginal rate of returns are decreasing, which only means that if you add a 50 kg additional bag of urea, you're not going to get the same increase in the yield as you were getting earlier. And that is because the soils have lost their organic carbon, soils have got toxic, soils have become alkaline. You know, so many problems are there. Water pollution has happened. So the productivity is not the same. The productivity response is not the same as before for various reasons. So that we can take it for granted. We need to ameliorate all this situation. The second one is there a policy? Yes. Now, secondary agriculture is the way to go forward. We are the policy basket I talked about on the market reforms, farmers mobilization through producers organization, aggregation platform through the Grameen agriculture rural markets, contract farming, deregulation of agricultural commodities. These all create a favorable policy environment, a free trade environment for converting India into one nation, one market, and then connecting the farm gate with the market. When I say market, it can be even a processing plant. Second one is to promote enterprise. As you're all aware, the great focus today is on enterprise. The Startup India, Stand Up India, or the recent Atmanirbhar package relating to MSME sector. Kindly have a look at all these packages. Don't look only at the agriculture package because these are all closely related. MSME is extremely closely related to agriculture, secondary agriculture. Now, within the secondary agriculture, promotion of enterprise has also been an old policy. I mean, not called secondary agriculture, but to promote enterprise in our country. To give you a bit of history on that, Department of Science and Technology has been promoting what is called as technology business incubators, TBIs, since 1990s. What started in the public sector has also gone to the private sector. Today in our country, we have as many as 300 technology business incubators. Now, agriculture in 2015-16, our ministry adopted a new policy of what is called agriculture business incubators, ABIs. And the ICAR has authorized, NAM is right in your city, Hyderabad. NAM has been mandated to develop comprehensive policies for agriculture business incubators. And as many as 27 ABIs either located at ICAR centers or some of the agriculture universities are operational or are about to get operational. Likewise, NABARD, for example, has also funded a few. Madurai Agriculture College under the Tamil Nadu Agriculture University has a very good incubation center. US Bangalore has got one for millets. Vilas knows it. So, along with this, a lot of private sector has also started developing. Now, we must focus on these agriculture business incubators. There are two things. The new policy reform is, earlier we were looking at, for example, developing enterprise. enterprise development programs. Like in Hyderabad, you have got National Science and Technology Entrepreneurship Development Board, right? They were looking at only promoting enterprise, but we also need incubation centers where the startup companies can come set up their business opportunities by sharing the office space, sharing the machinery, devices, so that they don't have to make initial capital investment, test their product in the market, and then once they're confident, they can go and set up their units. So what we need is today, agriculture universities and ICR institutes must bring in together both incubation center and the enterprise development policy. Agriculture universities must stop looking only at productivity. Please, for heaven's sake, look at what is happening to your agriculture produce after it's harvested. What are you doing about processing? What are you doing about food and non-food processing? What are you doing about developing business skills in the agriculture graduates? Yes, we have a, what is our student ready program, Rave camp, in plant, etc. But how effective is that? So I think what we should be doing in short is that we need a more comprehensive policy where our incubation centers and the entrepreneurship development programs combined. And then we need a third leg. In India, the shortcoming is government and non-government, and particularly corporate sector, they're looked at as two different worlds. Now we need a platform where industry, academia, and government come together. In America, universities and academia continuously interacting. We need to build that kind of a private-public partnership more. Why do we need, for example, in incubation center, private sector? It is professional bodies like FICCI, ASSOCHAMs, CII, who actually can teach business skills to our people. They can give the confidence level. And now that there's a beautiful association here of the Karnataka Agriculture Professional Association, my one request to you is that, copying from America, in America, the incubation centers are supported by what is called retired executive. That's called a SCORE. That is an association of the retired executives of the corporate world. They go and give advice to these incubation centers, to the startup companies. So I think what you can do is, please connect with the director, NARM. Dr. Srinivas Rao is there. He's a very good officer, a very good scientist. Vilas knows. And in fact, connect with Vilas himself, because Vilas himself is putting up an incubation center and doing so much on processing of millets. How do those startup companies of Vilas and of NARM or others, including our agriculture university there, how you can actually give your inputs to them? Because you kind of confidence you can give, they cannot get from anywhere else. So I think let us start this new culture, and slowly and steadily, it will keep growing up. And other thing that we should do is advocacy, policy advocacy, because once an association is there outside the government, you can keep writing to government, discussing with them, discussing with NABARD, discussing with banks, that can you start, promoting secondary agriculture as a proper activity. Department of Agriculture has to become Department of Agriculture and Secondary Agriculture. There must be some joint secretary or executive director whose business is to look at secondary agriculture, connect the banks, connect to the industry, connect with the institutes like IIMR, NARM, or any other Department of Science and Technology. I think that's the way forward. So to that extent, I must say that we still have a long way to go. But what has not been done is an opportunity, an exciting opportunity. So I think Hyderabad can be a real place where this can actually start. Okay, that's what I would like.
Thank you, sir. So I think we have a question from Lakshmipati Gowda. Sir, CLL Gowda, sir.
Oh, yeah. Good. I know him, yeah.
Dr. CLL Gowda.
Dr. Dalwai, very nice presentation. It was really very informative. So what I was trying to check was, see, when you talk about secondary agriculture, primary processing, secondary processing, I think the government should invest in getting the necessary infrastructure, for example, warehouses, cold stores, and also not only warehouse and cold stores, but also make sure that the farmers get warehouse receipts, which they can use, go to the bank and get an advance money so that they can use it for their immediate purposes before the process, the produce is sold or processed and other things. So that was one of my major concerns, that infrastructure is lacking in India, and I think the government should put more emphasis in building this infrastructure. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lakshmipathy Gowda. You shared your presentation with me some time back. Unfortunately, I was not able to come back to you, but thank you for sharing that with me. Your observations and your suggestions are extremely appropriate. You'll be glad to know that government has made an extremely positive response to all these things. Under the Atmanirbhar Bharat, realizing the lacuna of agri-logistics, I told you more than rupees 1 lakh crore is now being invested by 2024. And for the first time, this credit for building agri-logistics, warehouses, cold stores, reefer vans, pack houses, ripening chambers, processing plants, all these things are going to be funded on what is called an interest subvention. We had interest subvention, that means interest concession on crop loans so far. In fact, our committee had been recommending that, we have recommended also that we should have interest subvention on term loans. Very happy that under Atmanirbhar Bharat, up to rupees 2 crore investment, the entrepreneur, whether he is an individual or a company or a cooperative or a farmer producers organization, will get 3% interest subvention. That's a very huge amount. And you can take more than that also. On that, you won't get an interest subvention. But the moratorium is there. So there's a lot of facility given. And along with this 1 lakh crore for as agriculture infrastructure fund, I told you about fisheries and animal husbandry sectors also building similar infrastructure fund. The similar conditions, similar concessions. And Ministry of Food Processing is giving rupees 10,000 crore to upgrade the existing food processing units, because the small food processing units are not having appropriate technology, and therefore they are not able to maintain or sustain or adhere to FSSAI standards, for example. So that is now being helped with 10,000 crore. This is all apart from all other investments that are happening. The normal investments, as you know, under PM Kisan, PM Sampada, rupees 6,000 crore is there for food parks. Or our ISAM, integrated storage and agriculture marketing. We have enough money to promote godowns in our country. So for the first time, a package which looks at policies and the supply chain, that is the agri-logistics, have been introduced. And we can be fairly confident that over the next 5 years, you will see a change. And I think more important is that there is a new aspiration in the country. The youth are now wanting to become entrepreneurs. The universities have begun to discuss agriculture with a new look. Okay, so let me reiterate that a green revolution is an old hat. What we now need is a post-green revolution, income revolution. Okay, in fact, Dr. Kurian must be considered as the father of the first income revolution. In 1949, when Tribhuvan Das Patel, the great, great man who was the president of the Anand Milk Union up to 1972 till he passed away, and he was given technical advice by Dr. Kurian. Kurian asked his officers and the Department of Animal Husbandry of Gujarat, is there a market for my milk? He did not ask how to increase the milk productivity. He asked, is there a market for my milk? And second question, is there a market for better quality of my milk? If you say yes, I'll produce that. Imagine. He said, if there is a market, then I'll produce, because I want my farmers to benefit from that. So I think that question, I'm sorry, if I'm putting that pressure on the agriculture universities with that moral right, I'm saying, because we all belong to agriculture universities. Please relook at your, the way you are teaching the students, the way you are mandating yourself. Productivity is important, soil management is important, weather management is important, all of it is important. But ultimately, what are we going to do with that produce? What extension are you teaching our students? Are these students being taught only about production technology or post-production technology? So I think there's a new way of all these things. And agriculture is not only field crops. It is horticulture, plantation, livestock, fisheries, we need to get out of this mindset of agriculture means crops. Agriculture is everything. And the new engine of growth is there in livestock and fisheries and aquaculture and horticulture, not as much in crops. So I think let's relook at agriculture as scientists, as academics, as policymakers, as entrepreneurs, everybody who has got something to do with something, including the professional bodies. Thank you very much. Yeah.
So I think one question from
Thank you.
Texas A&M USA, Bimu Patil,
Oh, Bimu is there.
Vegetable and Fruit Improvement Center, Texas A&M USA. Bimu, you are online?
So can you please tell his name? I shall.
There is a Vegetable and Fruit Improvement Center.
I think Dr. Bimu Patil. Dr. Bimu Patil is the US Harvard product who is now the head of the, is the director of the institute there in USA. Yeah. Dr. Bimu, you can
I
ask.
think, yeah, I can talk now. I think they allowed me to talk now. Yeah.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Alwai and Dr. Vilas Tonpi for an excellent presentation. I think Ashok, I think you are doing great job. I have listened at least 2 or 3 presentations in the last 2 months through this virtual ways. And I think my question is basically related to the third type C you mentioned about the co-products. So in the United States, we are, of course, definitely this word waste is really not a relevant word. So I think I like that word you are using, co-products. So we're using the waste product and trying to use those for providing nutritional security in the US. So I would like to know what strategies you are recommending to the government of India to make these co-products as providing the nutritional security, because we have been addressing the food security for a long time. I think India is, in my opinion, it's food secure, but nutritional security is the one which we need to face a challenge. What are your recommendations to the government of India?
Yeah, I think I won't be able to answer very comprehensively, but I can only tell you so much that in the type B sector, we have recommended a lot of activities which will actually go to improve the nutrition value of our food component. The example I gave you was about mushroom, for example. So likewise, we have recommended a large number of activities which should be promoted because they're complementary and supplementary to the existing crop production system. And likewise for the livestock, where we have talked about how do we, for example, improve the quality of the pasture? How do we build large number of silos so that the fodder is green and then the feed appropriately is given to the animals, etc. So that is one. But I think more importantly, what we have now said and what government has also responded very positively is by way of policy changes to promote secondary agriculture. One concrete example I would like to give you is the amendment brought to the sugar control order. In the year 2018, sugar control order has been amended, which allows production of ethanol from bee heavy molasses and also directly from the sugarcane juice. Now, what was happening was, as you know, the ethanol can be utilized for higher value, next enzyme level. Unfortunately, that was not being allowed, and we were importing from other countries because this particular industry had to compete with sugar industry. Only sugar was being allowed to be produced from direct sugarcane juice. Now, with the amendment where the sugar factories can divert a part of their direct sugarcane juice and bee heavy molasses to produce ethanol, the deregulation has happened, and that will now enable the factories to match the supply of the sugar with the demand in the market and simultaneously meet the increasing demand for ethanol. And the virtuous cycle has been completed by increasing the ratio of blend from 5% to 10%. So this is a virtuous cycle. So now, similarly, now maize, for example, we are thinking that how maize can be utilized for other commodities. Of course, the 63% today is used in poultry sector and the fodder sector, cattle development sector. But then it also has got scope for producing nutritious food Okay, so how do we increase the productivity of maize? Like we're still at a very low level of maize productivity. On the fruits and vegetables particularly, the trends, what the trends show in our country, the National Sample Survey Organization, which conducts the consumption studies regularly, the trend that we're seeing is pretty contrary to what is happening in the Western world. In India, the demand, of course, will naturally reduce for cereals. Within the protein world, the demand is decreased for red meat but increased for eggs, poultry. And demand for protein, which had gone down for the last 5 years, again is increasing. Demand for fruits and vegetables is increasing. But what is of relevance for all of us to know in India is demand for fresh food is more than the demand for processed foods. And in the world over, people have begun to realize if we can improve agri-logistics and reach out our fresh food to the consumer, that is more healthy than eating a processed food. So in India, the policy today is how do we reach out fresh food? I can give you a concrete example. We did an experiment with quinoa. Quinoa, is a low cost, orange variety, which is grown in Punjab, in Abohar region. Now the supply was so much, they met the local demand, and a lot of it started getting wasted because it is harvested between October and Feb, and after that they were not able to maintain it. So we, with the help of a private company, we did the experiment where the entire expenditure was borne by the farmers and the private company. The packhouses and the reefer vans which carried the quinoa after harvesting from Punjab to Bangalore were able to fetch a new market. And how did this happen? Because the earlier cold store system was allowing only 15 days of extension. With our new intervention, it allowed an extension of 70 days. Now we're able to maintain quality without compromise for 70 days. These 70 extra days help the farmers of Abohar to reach out their produce to Bangalore or 2,500 kilometers. Now, after the first year experiment, they are now able to reach out to Middle East countries. So the fresh food is now reaching different parts of the country. Secondly, there is an increased market. And from today, from one reefer van, larger number of reefer vans have come up. One pack house has given rise to larger number of reefer vans. So the entrepreneurs have seen a business, consumers are consuming better food. So likewise, I can give some more examples. Maha Grapes in Maharashtra, for example, a federation of large number of smaller cooperatives in Nashik region, Kolhapur, Sangli, Satara, they have been able to build basic agri-logistics and reach out fresh fruits to different parts of the country and also have entered into European markets. So likewise, there are many examples which, because of the stronger agri-logistics and based on the new demand for fresh foods, are reaching out to larger number of people. I hope, Bhimu, it satisfies you, but I certainly would.
No, it's a great answer and with good example. So I have some other questions, but I would like to pass on that to the others, give an opportunity to others to ask questions.
Thank you. Nice talking to you.
Dipti, how much time we have still?
Sir, I suggest, since it's already 8:04, I suggest we close the Q&A session. I know many people have many questions and many doubts to ask, but since we have Q&As, we have 73 Q&As, and let us address, we will send them over the mail. Yeah. But before moving to vote of thanks, I would like few people to raise their hands just to know what you are taking from this session. So I'm lowering all the hands. Please raise your hands freshly to give your opinion. What are you taking away from this session?
Yeah.
So,
Sankaran, you can take.
So would you like to choose who to unmute? Tonapi sir, tell me.
Yeah, you can take Sankaran.
Okay.
Vembu, yeah.
Gauri Sankaran.
Vembu Sankaran, yeah. VS, yeah.
Okay.
An excellent
Sankaran.
Yeah. Oh, nice to have this. It's an excellent session and quite useful information. My only concern has been how to improve the job opportunities for, I should say the agri graduates getting back to their own lands for cultivation, for continuing their farming work. Because quite often we find that the agri graduates, they look for jobs, but they don't go back to their lands. So is it not possible to create some situation by which the agri graduates go back to their lands and apply their knowledge for improving their productivity? And that is the only matter of concern. But anyway, despite all that, the session has been very useful, quite informative, and the job opportunities for the agri professionals have been very elaborately listed. Let us wish that the agri graduate take advantage of these avenues indicated in the session. Thank you so much.
Sankaran sir, I request you please pose this question in the Q&A and be answered.
It is there. It is there.
Yes. And I'll just go ahead with one last.
I have listed the 4 or 5 questions there. Issues.
Absolutely.
Take them up.
Yeah. So one last person to be unmuted is Belide Harish.
Yeah. Good evening, sir, and good evening, ma'am. Yeah. Sir,
So please share what you are taking away from this session, how this session has been for you.
Yes.
Are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Please talk
Ma'am,
loud.
it is a good session. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, sir, it is a great session. I hope I have received many insights like job opportunities and many things like what are the processing post-production opportunities, what will be there, and also entrepreneurship. But I have only small confusion because of this COVID. There are many job opportunities losses. Maybe it could be a further like the COVID we can come out of this COVID and we can create job opportunities for many students and all entrepreneurs and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harish. So since the time is short, we have just taken few people for questions and testimonials as well. Now it is time that we acknowledge people who have caused this platform, and hence I would like to invite Mr. Narayan Bhatt to do the vote of thanks.
Yeah, just a minute, Deepti.
Yes, sir.
Let me take a minute and respond to the last observations.
Okay.
I find it very important. See, there was one suggestion that why are the agriculture graduates not going back to their lands? You know, this is not the, sorry to say, we have enough people on our lands in our country. We want to get the people out of land. You know, I told you we got 12 crore farm families cultivating just 140 million hectares. Average has come down to 1 hectare. So we don't need too many people on land. What we need is the agriculture graduates and other professionals to now go into new technology-based secondary agriculture. Let them go back and set up pack houses, cold stores, agri-logistics, processing, and different kinds of secondary agriculture activities. Let them go and form farmer producers organizations. Let them go and do contract farming systems. So what we need is agriculture graduates as entrepreneurs who are not going to go and compete with their siblings for the same piece of land, which is already 1 hectare or even less than 1 hectare in Uttar Pradesh. We need them to go and add the new value chain to the production system. Okay, so that's the thing. And second, don't look at Corona as something permanent. See, Corona is a disaster. I mean, it is an emergency. Society will keep having emergencies. There will be a natural calamity. From floods will be there. From infections it will be there. But what we need to learn from Corona is it has shown the underbelly of our system. The underbelly of our system is that people in our system are not able to generate enough incomes that will result into savings. Because we don't have savings, we are not able to meet the requirement of tomorrow. We are hand-to-mouth existence. If there was a migration of people from Hyderabad, Bangalore, Bombay, and Delhi back to the rural areas, it only meant that they were living on hand-to-mouth existence. So what we should be learning from this is build a new system where we are taking care of our labor properly. We're building new enterprises, which is based on profit, and we're therefore able to share our profit with the employees and build their savings. So savings is very important. Savings is important, please remember. And that is the only lesson we must take from Corona, and then move forward a new system. Thank you.
Got that, sir. Thank you so much for that final clarification. It was indeed important. Sir, Narayan Bhatt sir, so could you please do the vote of thanks?
Yeah, thank you. I am audible?
Yes, you
Yes.
are audible.
Okay. At the outset, I would like to say my sincere thanks to our chief guest of today's webinar, Dr. Ashok Dalwai. In spite of your busy schedule and time, you have spared the time for us. Sincere thanks on behalf of CAPA and on behalf of GUBA. Today, you have given another one direction to the CAPA of our next objective of agri professionals and collecting all the retired people and making it a advisory kind of this one committee and working on that. I'm sure Dr. Vilas Tonpi and under the dynamic presidency of our Kalgatgi sir and the advisory of CLL and Dr. Sada, we will work on it, sir. We will come back to you, sir. We will come back to you. Hope today's session is very beneficial to all. If you see the chat box, it is an excellent session. Together, GUBA and CAPA has made it very well. My sincere thanks to our CAPA president and founder, Vilas Tonpi, who is moderating the session, and our dynamic president, Vilas Ramesh Kalgatgi, who is instrumental in starting the webinar series. Sir, it is our more than around 12th webinar series.
Oh, very good. Excellent.
Yes. So, would like to say thanks to all the registered members, large number of registered members who have attended a session in the Zoom, in Karnataka Agri Professionals Facebook, and also in GUBA Facebook. Our sincere thanks to them. Would like to say GUBA is our, since the CAPA has started in 2012 with like-minded people, all the agri professionals and alumni of US, Dharwad and Bangalore who are residing in Hyderabad. We have around 300 people registered in the association, and GUBA has been associated with our CAPA since the beginning. They have been sponsoring the event and they are instrumental in so many activities. We are our sincere thanks to GUBA. And our next few sessions, we will have a joint sessions together, and we have a few eminent people to take on the webinar. So my sincere thanks to all the CAPA members who have attended and always been supporting of this CAPA organization. And my sincere thanks to our President Kalgatgi and Vice President N.G. Ramachandra and Secretary Shashikant Kulkarni and Treasurer Sheshigiri and Joint Secretary Santosh and Treasurer M.S. Deshpande. Thanks to all. Thanks to one and all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vilas, Ramesh, Narayan.
Thank you, Ashok.
Thank you very
Good
much.
to see you for the time.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Narayan,
we will connect back on the several other issues, sir.
yeah, we must, Vilas.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, you must continue the great.
Again, invite you when the meet is over for a face-to-face session.
Yes. Thanks a lot.
Nice
Bye bye.
connecting with you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you once
Great to see you, Ashok.
Thank
Thank
you. Thank you, Dipti. It was a great event. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Deepu.
sir.
Thank you, Albert.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
All the participants, bye. Good night.
Good night. Good night, sir.